pronounce it you a lot, presume.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Performance Talk. My name is Yul Gordon. Um, Chris isn't with us today, but as you know, Chris is an academic and a strength coach, so he has some other duties that he's seeing to this weekend, or I'm sorry, this today. So I'll be taking this forward with our guest today, Tom Little. Tom, welcome to the show, and we're glad to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you have going on right now, and how you initially got into strength and conditioning.
Hey, you. Thanks so much for inviting me on the show. Looking at your backlog of guests, it's a real honour. You've got some top names in the profession there. So yeah, a bit surprised, but also absolutely delighted to be invited on your podcast. My background, I'm a elite performance coach now for I think this is my 25th year. I've primarily worked within professional soccer. So at the
Okay.
moment, I work in the UK. Our team's been lucky enough to be just been promoted to the Premier League, so we're in the big time now.
Uh oh.
So yeah, yeah, there we go. It's exciting, but it's certainly going to be a challenging year. But yeah, it's great. So I've also worked primarily, like I say, in English soccer, but I've also consulted in quite a lot of other sports, some martial arts sports, some tennis, some cricket, some rugby.
Okay.
I invented something called the Hero Pro app, which led me past. I'm sure we could talk about that later on, but it led me down to working with numerous sports. So I've got a great network and contact within the kind of professional and day-to-day levels because we were designing nutritional programs for all these things. So that to coincide with the training regime. So yeah, great experience across the board in multiple sports. But my primary experience has been within soccer, quite typical performance career path. Did my degree, didn't know too much what I wanted to do as I come through. It's thinking
Right.
it was nothing like the US at the time, so think maybe high school teacher or something like that. And I tell the story, and people these days, youngsters coming through, they have to have a master's degree and do all these placement experience. And I actually got my job by applying to an advert in a newspaper. I think it was a local newspaper at that. So to get my foot in the ladder, I consider myself incredibly fortunate. But it said part time working with athletes, and it ended up working with a number of professional football teams in the UK. Absolutely loved it, immersed myself into it completely. I was lucky enough that I went on to lead that team, and we were working because it was in its infancy. Teams that wanted a performance or sports science input, big teams, so we were working with some of the UK's biggest teams at the time, and working with multiple clubs. So it's great for networking, experience of all these different coaches. Um, I've done my master's degree during that time, and then we were starting to evolve back in the UK of clubs actually wanting their own full time conditioning coaches. And at the time, I was thinking about doing a PhD, so I got offered a few roles and thought my PhD, which I wanted to do in simultaneous tactical and physical conditioning using what we would typically call the normal tactical games. I
Okay.
wanted to become an expert in that. So that led myself to just working with a singular club. And that's kind of been my path ever since. Been fortunate enough to work full time all the way through for 24 years, numerous different clubs within that time. But yeah, and now it's evolved. So we're heading up departments, and I've been lucky enough to be because I came in early. I'm a guy that's been head of performance teams now for a number of years, so around 10 teams. And as I've just mentioned before, it's evolving from small teams of two or three to my current team is about eight, with also an overview of looking after the academy as well.
Okay. It sounds like you started, quite a bit like a lot of us did, but then quickly, you know, evolved into where you are now. And I'm saying that with what you answered just then, and then just researching your history a little bit, you've had a lot of you've had a you've had a lot of irons in the fire all at the same time, so to speak, with a book and a club. And did I see somewhere in your history a that you were part of or ran or started a facility or something? Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, the facility part is wrong, but yeah, various branches have presented themselves when I came through. So when I first started, the, the practical side of it, S&C in the UK was so far behind the US. It was frightening. But lucky enough, my first ever boss, he had some great contacts over in the US, and he sent me over there a number of times. So I went on what's now known as Exos, but it was a voluntary tennis academy when I was in there. And while I was over, I was lucky enough to meet Vern Gambetta, and he was a absolute giant in the game, but he couldn't have been nicer to me. He was a nobody at the time. He introduced me to people like Ray Cook, who's been a massive influence in functional training for me. Paul Jack as well. He was a giant within the industry at the time, very practical focus. So look down him. Lucky enough to meet Mel Sif, who was just again an absolute giant in the field. His book Super Training is one of the first ones that I recommend to
Well,
everyone, but
right, right,
it's so
right. So
virtually impossible to read. I read every page about 100 times, but yeah, over the time I've kind of, you know what it's like in working in professional sport. You almost need to protect yourself in some manner. The average tenure for coach
ri-
in the UK is less than a season. So I've tried to develop some extra strings to my bow as I'm going along. So I've
okay,
developed two acts in my time. One was around using conditioning drills to do your physical training at the same time. I invented an app for that that was called Soccer Smart. And then more recently, it's been a journey around nutrition, an app that I made it was originally called Colour Fit based on the concept that we've done, but it's
right.
evolved into something called Hero Pro Sport, and that's fortunately for me has been reasonably successful, and we've worked with over 100 elite organisations around the world.
So let's delve into the Color Fit book a little bit and the Hero Sports concept.
Yeah, so that was really born out of frustration. So many things are in life, but this one was I've always obviously had a good handle and a high interest in nutrition, but as I got older, it grew and grew. I had a greater appreciation for how much nutrition had affected everything. Your inflammation levels, your susceptibility to injury, your general energy, your
Right,
ability to
right,
perform. Obviously, everybody doesn't want they want good body composition, so I had a huge influence in that. But that was how it started. A manager or head coach would come to me and say, basically, I don't want any fat guys in my team, and that's
right.
entirely how you judge the nutritionist.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it
I mean,
exploded, and the kind of appreciation for the sphere now is it's really high, and it just seems every other job that you see seems to be
it's
performance nutritionist. So that's great to see.
it's amazing
But
to me. It's amazing to me how much the visual plays into um, coaching. You know, I know
without a shadow of a
I
doubt.
know a player can look relatively unfit, but they go out there and they're just absolute animals.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but
I'm
but
just saying.
but there's a but the coach, and I don't want to sound like I'm beating up sports coaches or skill coaches or anything like that, because I'm not, because they're going on what they see and they're going, dude, you're out of shape. That's why you didn't get that last ball. Hey, coach, did you see I just got the first 5 50 balls that were out there? I missed one.
Yeah, definitely that happens. That happens. But as
Right,
I almost alluded to there, I think when you're young and so many professional athletes are young, you're almost bulletproof. You can get away with a bad diet to a certain degree, and you can be
right,
super skinny. Just go having a lot of meals from your McDonald's and the like. But as you get older, you cannot get away with. bad behaviors around nutrition. And the guys that really get it are the ones that are entering into the theatres and that have that real appreciation around recovery. Their
Well,
body, it's no much about getting fitter, it's about your ability to go again and recover. So they have a
right,
really good buy-in for what you're trying to do them. It can be difficult for the youngsters to get that buy-in because they can be doing things that are opposing some of the ideal things that you talk about nutrition, but still be performing at the ultimate high level. And that was a frustration for me. It was putting so much work into the players around nutrition. I was doing presentations, I was doing posters, I was doing cooking lessons, I was going round to the houses, but none
yeah,
of it just seemed to be sticking. Like all this work and the outcome of the work, just it wasn't the ratio of work to outcome that I was craving for. So it's like how do I get the buy-in from the players? How do I get them to understand? So my first principle was simplifying nutrition as much as possible. So the, I was watching my son play on, he was a baby at the time, playing my phone, and he just knew what to do without being told anything. It was intuition that was driving his behavior. So
right,
I was thinking, how can I make the basics of nutrition as intuitive as possible? And we were working around carb periodization. So in any performance sport where you've got regular competition or regular peak performance, you're generally working on carbohydrate periodization, which is basically just eating more carbohydrates when you're training hard or coming up to performance. You can perform as well as possible because carbohydrates are our most efficient fuel source. But when you're not, that's when you're taking care of the other big factors about nutrition. You're taking care of your body composition. You're taking care of your health. So then you've got like this holy pyramid of what you're trying to achieve with nutrition. So how can I make that intuitive? Right, let's play around with things that you see on the phone. Let's play around with icons. Let's play around with the intuitive names. Let's play around
yeah,
with the intuitive colours. And it wasn't my original intention to design something that looked like a dinner plate, but in the end, we did have this design. So we broke up the main goals of nutrition. We thought, right, put these layers of intuition. So for performance, we called it performance fuel. That covered the carbohydrates in somebody's diet, portion of carbohydrates. We put a running man icon to that, and we made it the color green. So three levels of intuition. For health, we made it a heart symbol. We called it health, and we made it gold for a golden glow of health. When it came to body composition, it's a bit more difficult. There's a lot of to and fro in
right,
that, but in
right.
the
I was,
end,
that
we
was,
came with the name lean muscle. So that covered both being lean, but also gaining muscle that you need to. And we covered protein within that because that has a huge effect in that area. And we give it a little muscle icon, so like a six-pack icon. We give it a red color to represent a burning metabolism. And health, if I just go back to that, we invented something to quantify health as well. So we did a kind of gold standard analysis of all your important vitamins, minerals, good fats, fiber, relative to your recommended intake. And we converted that into a score, which is called health score. And then that gives us a real objective marker for health performance. So for any meal, we would present what we call perfect plate, and it would have like a pie chart representations of these three areas of what that meal's going to give you. So when I'm talking about carbohydrate periodization, it becomes a lot simpler to the players. I can just say, when you're training hard or coming up to a match, look for the more green color. And when you're not, come away from green a little bit and you're looking for a bit more red and yellow, health and lean muscle.
yeah. I
Things
mean,
might vary a little bit depending on your principles that we're doing.
that concept of simplifying nutrition for athletes. I know a lot of times, and we do it in all of the performance fields. Sometimes we'll start something, man, and we'll make it just way too difficult, even for ourselves.
Yeah,
It's time
definitely. You,
consuming. Yeah. So if you can,
GPS is a prime example of that. Like GPSs. you can be if you put all the stats available in front of the coach, he's just gonna like not be interested at all. You've got to create something using all your key markers, make it as simple as possible that he can digest in a matter of 10 seconds. So again, that might be a scale out of 10. It might be a percentage of match load. It might be these different color codes. So red meaning too high, blue meaning too low, all these layers of intuition so he can absorb that information and get the key information out of that as quickly as possible. But just returning back to the colour fit journey, so that was kind of the picking of the meals. The next bit, hardest bit, was getting the players to make them these meals themselves. Because of course we do feed the players at breakfast and
Right.
lunch, but the vast majority of meals they're going to cook themselves.
Right. Right.
So if we're not teaching these players and making it as easy as possible for them to prepare the meals, then again, all this work that you're doing is wasted to a certain extent. So that was the next stage. It was a huge undertaking, but we had this library of meals. We had over 400 meals in there. And we decided, right, we're going to make videos of every single one of these meals, really kind of succinct as possible, so that it stays within the kind of X generation attention span.
Yeah. The
So we
TikTok
made all
attention
these
span.
videos.
That's what I call it.
Exactly.
The TikTok attention span.
Yeah,
You
that's
you
a good expression.
you got
So
you
yeah,
got 30 seconds to get it done.
we expanded beyond that, unfortunately. We went all the way up to a minute. So we may have lost half the players with that, but that honestly, that was the eureka moment where it went from players. Yeah, we had some captivated, but all of a sudden, everybody was interested in what we were providing them. It was a talking point in the canteen, and I knew I really had something at that point that was going to go on and be effective. So
Now,
over time, I just made that on Google Drive, and over time, and lots of money, we managed
yeah.
to create the app, which is, like I say, very intuitive. For all the bells and whistles that an app does, and it has a big education section, which is kind of video animation based as
Now,
well.
now
Um,
is that
you
app?
can
Is that
order meals on there. You can order your ingredients. You can't take every excuse a player can throw at you, because if there's any too marginal barrier, they will not get over it. We took away everything. So the choice of the meal, showing them how to make it, they can order the meal on there. They can order the ingredients off the app as well. And then they have meal plans to guide them as well, based on different training regimes, different sports on there as well. So literally every level we're providing with them, and there's no excuse then not to be following a reasonably good diet.
and the thing that I noticed with nutrition, and we talked to a lot of nutritionists and performance nutritionists on the show, but the big thing I noticed with the athlete, those guys do a great job, the nutritionists here, and we'll talk about that in a second. Um, but it's it's the buy-in part initially that I always see that's a little bit of a struggle, and it looks like you found a way into getting them to think along the same lines, getting the athlete to think along the same lines as you, if not exactly, like they need to, at least moving forward and looking forward, and not so much just kind of haphazard.
Yeah, we're in the salesman's game. We're in the performance is humans. So we are in the sales game, like it or not. So how do we sell the players? So making things easy is a really good way of doing them. Making them aesthetic as possible is a huge part of it, particularly when it comes to nutrition. We eat with our eyes straight away. So if you
Oh
have
yeah.
that visual element to it, you've a huge kind of an emotional connection there. Can you tie into the emotions of their kind of upbringing or ethnicity or nationality, where you may be putting something on that's uh, Latino or Caribbean or anything like that, making sure you have those real major food groups covered that have a nationality attractive. to them, making sure, like I say, it's as practical as possible. Um, they're the big barriers, and it's not just you don't have to have a colour fit play. I've seen so many good examples of how you can make it intuitive and simple. England football relay it to their formation system, so it'll be like football teams play like a 4-4-2 or four
Right.
three three, and they relay their portions of carbohydrates or proteins or health foods based on these different formations. So there's lots of ways you can get that salesmanship to get your athletes to buy into it. So use whatever means that you can.
Well, while we're on nutrition, nutrition is a great segue into data science. I see you. What? Let me just ask the question. What parts of data science do you lean towards use of with your programs?
All of them, really. I think it's a great thing to have data science in terms of providing that objectivity when you're talking to anyone, so it's not just your subjective opinion.
Right.
The biggest thing for me before we get into that is to plan well, though. I think if you have experience and you can use your data science within this to guide some of it, you guide your plan. Um, but if your plan is right, the numbers will take care of themselves. Where the
Okay.
data science comes in really for me is adding that objectivity. So if you've got to talk to a player and you're saying, I thought you were like this today, and they're saying, well, no, I completely disagree, then it's nice to have that objectivity to help guide you. And then when
Right.
you're working in team sports, that individual variation that is it really helps you with. So for a single session, there will be variability within that session that will have some importance, but it won't be huge as an individual session in terms of ramifications. But over time, repeated sessions, session after session,
Yeah, it
and
tells
there's
a
this
story.
individual variation, then you start seeing a much bigger and important story, and you can subjectively keep a hold of all that if you've got 40 odd players that you're working for every day. So that's the accumulation of load or whatever you're measuring through data science over time. That's where you data science really starts to provide a bigger picture, whatever you're looking at, whether it's AC loads, whether it's just looking at a certain percentage of certain weeks. That's where you can come in. And then communication is the other real big one when it comes to any kind of technology. Can we make communication as efficient as possible? So can we let the players know what they're doing basically? So over a macro cycle, microcycle, daily cycle, can we provide information to them to help efficiency in terms of all the processes? Can we get communication streams in there in terms of that are going to enable us to work quickly and more effectively? So a good example of this is readiness. We have a system of readiness where if a player goes over a certain threshold, all the key members of staff get alerted to that. So, say for example, it's just on a measure of 1 to 5, and somebody's if they put a 4 or 5 in terms of their readiness, in terms of being fatigued, all our medical staff and performance staff get alerted immediately via notifications. It then goes into a deeper level of understanding. So we just want a basic rating of often the things. I find if you go too detailed into it, you lose the buy-in from the players. So we only look for a deeper buy-in once to go over a certain threshold. So right, then we want to know where are you sore? How did you sleep last night? What the stress levels like? Give us some kind of guidance to why you're feeling like this beyond what we've got a GPS. And then more importantly, how can we help you? How can so if you put your throwing through your hamstrings, right, we're aligning all the masseurs in. If they're saying it's something to do with the diet or sleep, or maybe we're looking to help them in that manner as much as we can. and looking to maybe adjust training. So that's the other level, just that efficiency of communication and it driving processes really quickly.
The one of the one of the three things that you said that jumped out at me was one, it takes time. So you have to convince the athlete we need to take these measurements over time so that we can see. Don't really worry about them right now, but when it's time, we'll take a look at them and see what your course was. Um, and then we have to all of us coaches and athletes have to guard against wanting quick results from something that are, I my perspective only, but data science and the collection of the data and all those things, those are designed to be used over time, like you were alluding to, um, as tools to help you, you know, in what to do next, not necessarily, an acute an acute remedy to what's going on. And then help and communication. Yeah, I'm in the ballpark with you on that. Anything that you can tell us or the audience or listeners about getting that, that understanding of communication through to the athlete, that they need to, you know be clear and concise, and tell us. I don't want to give the impression that athletes lie to you, but we're all, from former athletic stock. We're not athletes anymore, but we used to be. So when the coach walks up to you and says, "How you feeling?" "I'm good," or "How you feeling?" "I'm okay." They,
Yeah.
well, I see
When
it.
it's subjective, you do have that level where
Right,
they can lie. No player on earth is going to say
right,
day before the game, feel like crap. They're
right.
saying, "Oh, pick me, coach, and start doing burpees in front of me and
Exactly,
cartwheels.
exactly.
I am ready to go," and the hamstrings hanging on
Yeah,
because everybody wants to play. That is their world. That is what they live for, and there's big financial implications in terms of match appearance and things like that in the modern game. So yeah, it's huge. But going back to your point that you made, it's such a great point that databases need time to really get the most out of them, get the information. So I was new to Sheffield United last year. So I came in and they'd had a bad injury record for the time, and I was looking at the data. And the other thing with it, you can't just take data from one scenario and apply it to another scenario. You have to
right,
learn about each individual club. So I'm looking at the data, and it's not that extreme, really. Was my first expression to lead to all these injuries from a loading perspective. But over time, I learned these patterns of they would do a lot of shape type work where certain positions within the squad got worked quite a bit harder, particularly in certain loading parameters that are associated with injuries. So sprint distance, high intensity distance, for
right,
certain positions and these really key practices. It was the coach taking them, and this was to get ready for match day. These are the patterns of play that you go and go on. The outliers over time really was significant, but not time to get there. And obviously, the coach likes to doing it in a certain way so much because he's been very
right,
successful and there's a clear indication of why you're doing this drill. So come to him was it needed a clever conversational piece to do that. And then there's other areas that you've got to consider as well. So this our training environment, we train hard. Intensity is absolutely key. But it was across the board in everything that we did. So the warm-ups to some extent would end with some intensity. The work virtually all the time, not high volume, but intensity is what we
right,
is a key driver in everything we do. In the weight room, we talk about intent all the time, and it was reasonably for a soccer program. It was a reasonably high level. How do you tie in that information? There's still, for me, there's still no real great tie-in piece between what you're doing in the gym, your conditioning room, and how you tie that GPS together. So
Right.
all these things I've talked about there, how do you piece them together? So I, I, I came to the conclusion for certain individuals, certainly, and all the holistic forms of training, we were overloading some certain players. And so it was presenting that case. So we didn't need to do anything massively drastic. So
Right.
say you can't do that practice or anything like that. It was little tweaks, but across all departments. So by
I
doing that, we can maintain our absolute, what we truly believe in, intensity, intent, all these things that set us apart. And we all believe in the coaches. We can still do it. We've just taken a slight edge from it and then coming up with parameters to do that. So, for example, in these phases of play, we just added another player into that and allowed them to rotate within that, made the work rest ratio slightly longer. And then all of a sudden, these guys were not significant outliers. Still outlying the group a little bit, but that's what you do on match day. So you
right.
do have to have some time of that, but it wasn't, it was much more kind of controllable and injuries started to come down. But that took me from the start of the season, which is around May, to right up to Christmas to get a really good picture and indication and come up with strategies that everybody's going to buy into and maintain our success to do. So, yeah, not
One,
easy. And you're grabbing all those elements of data
right.
science,
And
experience within a specific environment because this last season, I learned that more than ever that you can't just take lessons from other areas and directly apply them into a different environment. Everyone is different kind of squads of players. They can be different ages, different injury backgrounds, coach
it's
intent in terms of his overall tactical and technical philosophies, intent in the weights room. There's all these things that you've got to
and
get a grip
it's
of
always
and modulate
there you go.
to work together well.
The yeah, what you're saying there is critical, and I put it as part of the soft skills package. I know, we think about soft skills just as communication, but that being able to work with everybody, the coaches, the players, the other professionals that are in the building, possibly that, have time with the athlete. I know here in the U.S. there's physios, nutritionists, psychology people. There's everybody,
Yeah,
and being
yeah. The
able
soft,
and being able
big
to.
part of the soft skills. Sorry, you. I keep on
No,
interrupting
go
you.
ahead. You're
Go
fine. This is your show, man. Come on.
on. I'm just jumping on your factor of the soft skills, and a huge part of the soft skills for me coming into a new environment is having that appreciation of they will be doing lots of things well already. So don't just come in and say, I've done, had success with this previously, look at what they're doing already very well and either stay with it or adapt it slightly if it's doing well. So that's a huge part of the sell and a huge part of those little tweaks that I talked about. As long as you're achieving your key objectives, the principles are not always the key. There's so many different ways of doing things. But
Yes.
if you can make you have your what you want to achieve right at the top of the driving force of everything, the principles and practices, there's millions of different ways of achieving them. And if you're already having success, well, use that because you'll get the buy-in of all your current staff and the coach who's the absolute kind of is God to you over it. If the coach doesn't buy into it, then you're lost really.
Right. The yeah. I mean, you see a lot of times, especially, you know guys that are heavy into the weight room part of performance, it, and when they become their first few instances in having to deal with the whole spectrum of performance from recovery to return to play and all that's to nutrition, when they're part of that package and not just one part of a bigger package, when they're dealing with that whole thing as the director or the head of performance or whatever, it becomes something completely new to them. Tell us about your first experience when you went from just, a member of that team to heading that team.
Yeah, there's different realms in there. I've always been faith as possible, but in the early days, like I say, I have individual FNC guys now, but in the early days, you had to take care. You were everything basically, and
Right.
then some. And the
Right.
technology was so slow; it was
Yeah.
like it's a
Exactly.
different world to what we're doing now. But the strength room and, and gym-based work in UK soccer is difficult because there's not still not that buy-in that like you have in America. In America, you have the collegiate structure where everybody's school gets very good technically and exposure to your key work that you're going to do in the weight room. Within the UK, and as we've got have more European players and players from around the world that don't necessarily have kind of gym-based ethos, it's got more and more complex, and everything is about performance on match day, and we could be playing 3 times a week. So to include a good overload strength program in that, particular for the leg, can be very difficult.
Right.
But I believe in strength training, leg strength training, 100 times in a million percent. Good
You know,
maximum strength level gives you so many different things. It gives you the biggest thing for me is it makes them more efficient. Running efficiency improves and it's locomotive sport soccer. So every
yeah.
single step they take, and they're taking hundreds of thousands of steps, is
Right.
going to be more efficient. They're going to be faster. They're going to be more powerful. You look at the top level, what's the key differentiator athletically between players? It is the power metrics. So, how fast are they? How agile are they? The maximum
Right.
speed capabilities are going to be hugely influenced. So then finally, if done well, progressed really well, you're going to make that player more robust. So I totally believe in it, but then you've got to look at the stumbling block. You've got all these players with different niggles. They've got all these different training background. They've got all these
Right.
different training ages and actual chronological ages that make
Yes.
it very difficult on top of the buy-in. So that's where you've got to individualize, but more than anything, make it as efficient as possible.
Right. And
Excuse me, you.
go ahead.
I've just been having to move location slightly, but I'm sure we'll be fine still. So yeah, the tricks in terms of making things as efficient as possible. There's lots of things that are coming into trading that have been around for ages, but you know what? Strength and conditioning is like these things come round in circles. So we're using peaks where it will be we use one leg exercises quite a lot that's have the less overall loading, but also there's argument for that around training efficiency, uh, training functionality, which I believe in, and Mike Boyle's driven massively, and I'm so influenced by Mike Boyle, it's ridiculous. Isometrics is another huge area that's at the fore at the moment. So can you train key positions and get good functional outcomes from that? But the kind of overload and recoverability from isometrics is far easier for the players to digest. And then can you do ones that really tie into injury prevention for that specific player as well? So can you do it in a certain motor pattern that they're able to do? So some people would deadlift rather than squat? And can you use things, the functional tweaks, so bands and the likes that are going to
Right.
promote automatic movement patterns that these players don't have to think about too much, but they're going to get all that those beautiful things at once. They're going to get strength overload. They're going to get an overload into key kind of stability muscles like your glutes and just all the functional patterns that happen when you're dealing with it kind of locomotor sports go back to the guys that I talked about, the absolute gurus and
Right.
Wayne Gambett and Greg King, can they deal with gravity, momentum, ground reaction forces, and do that
R-
really well?
Right. Some
And
of
can
those.
you then
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And then can you tie that into some of your prehab work so it's not just your focus strength session? Can we get these microdosing in the prehab work? And can we kind of come up with a conjoined progression between some of our prehab strength training, but then what we're doing on the field? So a lot of our prehab work will be around sprint biomechanics and sprint kind of facilitatory exercises and the key angles and key muscles and the likes.
I know that when I was when I figured this out to a reasonable level for me. Um, there's four things that I always took into account, like you were just saying. Do some of that stuff in your prehab work or in your warm ups.
Hmm.
When you're warming up, you can address some of that strength stuff. Um, but when I one thing I really learned in Europe in the '90s, I'm dating myself a little bit, was the three most important areas of any athlete or for any athlete are movement, energy systems, and then management of all that.
Yeah,
So so
hugely.
so if we start to recognize those things, then you can, like you were explaining to our audience here, you can start to add micro doses of some strength training, as long as you're careful, how you're doing it, and you're paying attention to everybody you're doing it with, because like you said, different ages, different training age, different chronological age, and then just different types of buy-in from each athlete, almost down to the individual level. So
Yeah, I think efficiency is such a huge thing in terms of buy-in. So if we start off with the gym, where is your compromise level between volume of sets and outcome that you're doing there, but
right.
also outcome of fatigue? So we've adopted something in our lighter session now where we just look at two sets. And there could be some argument against that in terms of necessary stimulus, but we have a real focus on intent. Intent is plastered everywhere around our training facility. It's one of our key words. And I think if you do have good intent in your key lists, that reduced set number can be um, work well. And where it does really work well is buying from the players. The buying from the players since we switched to that,
With
it's I wouldn't say night and day, but it's been absolutely huge in terms of just that slight adjustment in terms of volume, particularly for the legs.
Sometimes it doesn't take much to turn a whole program around, but just a little bit more than 2 or 3% more, at the buy-in level than you had
It's
before.
education,
Yeah,
education, and sell them.
yeah,
Listen, guys, we're going to do this, but it requires you to really give it good effort levels rather than just going through the motions. Otherwise, we're wasting our time. We're all wasting our time in it if
yeah.
it's something we want to do.
I
Time's
t-
something that you never get back. It's our most precious commodity. So if we're going to be in here, let's make the absolute most of it and then get some of your key athletes to be real influence within that environment. The
yeah.
other area for efficiency, sorry, go on you.
No, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
The an even bigger area of efficient for me is your on-field training though. So can we work the energy systems that we want to work for, get the physical demand within the technical training that the coaches are providing? Because as I talked about, there's such a huge array of things that you've got to work on in these multi-sport decision-making locomotive sports. You've got to cover all your kind of motor abilities. You've got all the other things that tie into it. So social, psychological
Right,
influence, physical training. There's so many keys coming in wherever you can make it something efficient. And the biggest thing as well is we've got 60 odd games we've got to compete in through a season as well. So wherever you can kill two birds with one stone, you've got to do that. And technical training is comes above physical training when it comes to sports such as soccer, as it should do, in my opinion. So, can we look within the what the coaches and clubs' philosophy is to provide our physical framework within their technical training as much as possible? I mentioned my PhD. I became expert is the wrong word, but I became quite learned in how to do that. So, what
Okay.
different energy systems work within different types of games, different player numbers within your teams, different rules within different games as well, different spaces for the pitch sizes. So having a good appreciation of how you can tweak things a little bit to get what the coach wants, but also what we want as much as possible. And then when you should have that framework and knowledge and drill database, which you can back up with the GPS and other information there and build a drill library, how can we put that into a program that works for the coach? Because he'll generally pick a microcycle structure that he likes to work to from a tactical and preparation point and his viewpoint on keeping the players mentally fresh. So we have the big one that's come in European soccer is tactical periodization, where they're working on different elements during the week that's to do with smaller spaces. They have two areas where they want a condition during the week. So it's just a Saturday to Saturday performance. They pick the start of the week and they call one
Right.
strength day where they're working on tighter areas and touches of the ball and, and physical contacts, hence the term strength. And then they'll have another conditioning day where they're going into much more match specific areas and match specific team number sizes that is going to work on more high intensity distances, sprint distances in there, where your strength day that I mentioned before is going to be more XLs, D cells, and turning. So, can you one build the type of physical conditioning that you want to do them, and then the really hard bit is getting the buy-in from the coaches to do them within a training paradigm that's going to provide
Right.
an overload should you want that. So do this many reps, do it for this duration, and give them this type of rest ratios. And that's why
Right.
you you can don't dictate to the coaches, just look for little tweaks within their program or suggest slight alterations in terms of training drill, but that still fits within their technical paradigm. You've got to sell to them that your key appreciation of what you're going for and all this is what they want to achieve from a technical standpoint. Don't try and mess with the drill because you'll think it'll produce a more clear intensity of what you want to produce. You're just going to lose them completely.
Yeah.
It's
And
tweaking it as much as you can to try and get your objectives. You need some real tricks of the trade to do this. So I mentioned a great knowledge of a drill database is good, but you also, this is quite hard to understand unless you've actually been in this, but when you've got a squad of players numbers is absolutely key to what you can do. So if
right.
you've got, for example, I'll keep it easy, it's 16 players because it's very divisible, then the coach wanted to do a strength day, so he wants something that's relatively small sided. So you'd say, right, I want to do, let's split them up into four groups, and we're going to have players playing four aside. So it's just like normal football, but basically you've just got less players per team, which raises the intensity because they're involved in play more often.
Right.
But you know now you've got four teams, so the rotations of how you're going to work, you want all the
Yeah.
players to do the same drill on two different pitches. The
There you go.
maximum, the even amount of times they've got to play each other the same amount of time, so you can make it a competition. So that dictates how many repetitions that you need to do. So you will have, as a conditioning coach, you'll say, right, I'm working on this energy system. It's the
Right.
VO2 energy system today, or high intensity. A lot of people call it the mass now, maximal aerobic
Yeah.
speed type
Right.
training. So you want to work on that. I know. So I want a total exposure of around 16 minutes. How can I achieve that using this certain amount of reps that the structure dictates to? Right. So if I've got four teams working on two different pitches doing different things, that dictates that they've got to do six repetitions to all do the same things. So I know I want them to work for 6 minutes, 16 minutes, sorry, is a total. I'm going to divide that by six, and that gives me my repetition times.
Right.
You've got to be able to do that in a matter of finding your numbers out off the physiotherapist that morning to going into your
Yeah.
coaches
Yeah.
meeting.
You
You've
have
got to do that in a matter of minutes. And that's why different tools or different tables to look for, drill libraries or anything like that, can really help you again organize as optimally as possible to
and
get that
I,
buy-in from the coach. The buy-in is everything.
I like what you say. There's have a drill library because there's multiple drills to accomplish the same objective.
Yeah,
You don't have to use the same drill, and that's also important to buy in because if the player says, "Okay, we're just going to go do this," eventually they figure out, we're going to do this today, so I know how much effort I have to give. So it's not fresh, it's not something new, and they know they do multiple things on the field, and it's always when you're out there playing, it's always something that you don't anticipate. So the more that you can do that's different, that accomplishes the
yeah.
same thing, helps with that buy-in too. Uh,
And you've
and-
got to start from the framework of what the coach wants or the philosophy of the club
right,
is from their tactical perspective. Because tactics dictates physiology. It really your tactics out what you want to do on match day. So that encompasses the physicality of it. So which positions are going to be our key positions for high intensity? How often are they going to do it? Are we going to play high press? Are we going to sit back? Are we going to counter attack? All these different things that relate it to physicality, and then you've got to apply that through the drills that you're doing and that individuality of the training, and then tie them in. And I sound like I'm all for you've got to do things to the coach. There's definitely a place for running. Running is like or generic conditioning
right,
because you can have a tighter grip on things like intensity. It's just easier to perform. You can get more objective evidence if somebody's becoming fitter over time as well, just by either doing it faster, are they
right,
able to go further? It gives you that objectivity that you can really use to get buy-in from the players. You don't actually, if it's just a technical drill, you don't have anything really to compare because it's so sporadic and different every time to
right.
show them objectively that they're getting fitter. And
I,
also, there's huge psychology when it comes to running training. I get all my biggest high fives and the squad going mental, and not after we've completed five aside or something like that. It's after we've done some running training and they're exhausted.
yeah,
That's when you get everybody slapping each other on the back. Yes, that endorphins, if I feel great, I go further, we're getting fitter, sacrifice of hard work, all these elements that
man.
that you
There's no
stimulating
replace.
the psychology of
Yeah,
I feel fit. If you feel fit, you will be fit. Psychology is just as important physiology when it comes to convincing your team that they are in an elite position of performance.
yeah, and that the psychology and the body language and the whole thing. So it's something. It's something all to
Sacrifice.
yeah. But check this out, man. There's no replacement for just straight up running for training,
Yeah,
especially in the I call them the movement sports. You call them the locomotive sports. But any sport where running is the basis of what you have to do, there's no substitute for just getting out there running. It took me a while to learn that as an athlete way back in the days. But when I became a coach, I realized, you know what, I was made to run all those times, and I did it. I didn't necessarily, enjoy it, but it always felt good when I was finished.
yeah. If you
So
look at the the percentage of time that people are actually involved on the ball, it's so minute. You're like, why even bothering with any
yeah,
technical training? It's like
right,
2%, but then you've got to have that appreciation of it. It's knowing when to use your physicality that all the tactical elements bring, and that's the key to unlocking the doors in these key moments, whether it be basketball, American football,
right.
whatever it may be. It's a decision of when and where and how to use that physicality.
Well, Tom, I always get to this point in the podcast, and I look up at my little clock, and I'm like, man, we could talk for another 40 minutes, but we can't, or else the production guy's gonna get mad at me and start asking me what he's supposed to do with all this extra stuff. So I have my final two questions for you. The first one is what advice would you give a young um, would be performance professional just getting started? What advice would you give them on coming into the profession?
Yeah, I alluded to it earlier. It's so hard to get into this profession now. Sports science in the UK is the most dominant degree course that you can do, but the actual level of jobs at the professional level is still relatively low. So you're picking from a huge pool, and these pools just at right at the bottom level now. They're asking for master's degrees just to do experience. So it's not going to be the level of education that is going to set you apart. It's going to be your level of experience. So I would advise anybody to get experience wherever you can in terms of practical S&C coaching. So volunteer for your local kids team, volunteer for any level. Um, Send out letters and emails offering your voluntary service for maybe somebody that's down on the chain a little bit, the a lower academy, the women's team, because it's only in its infancy in terms of professionalism in the UK. Just get that experience, and it doesn't matter what level it is. If you've got that experience, it teaches you so many things about dealing with numbers, about selling to players, about motivational body language, and verbal language that you need to pick up that you just can't pick up in academia. Look for a good course as well that offers a good academic path.
Right,
When I did it, it just prepared you really to go on and do another degree. But things at times have changed now. And the other thing that's going to give you, as well as all these key skills that really matter when you get in the performance realm, it's going to provide you with people that'll vouch for you.
uh,
So I'm getting all these different CVs for any position. I'm getting hundreds and hundreds of CVs.
right,
The biggest thing in anything is if I pick up the phone and say, "What's this guy like?" It's like within a minute, I'll know if he's going to be he, her, whoever it may be.
right.
It's going to be suitable for this position because we're dealing with humans. So if you're not good with dealing with humans and have kind of um, you don't have to be an eccentric or anything, but if you don't have a personality that other people warm to and get on with and have these social skills, you
Yeah,
can't work in the performance industry
some
because you've
kind of
got to
personality
deal with
anyway.
people. Yeah, I
A
mean,
little bit of a
there's different
personality.
realms of it now. Analytics and sports science can be very much where you're in the background a little bit and you're not having to deal so much with, but you're still having to deal with a multidiscipline team that's
Yeah,
got to
you're.
talk and
It's
work and communicate together. So that's good. Getting anywhere and show your work ethic, show that you're just a decent person, and that'll be the thing that I think will get you through the door more than having all these kind of academic bells and whistles.
right. Well, that's some great advice and something for our young listeners and young professionals to think about as they matriculate their way into the field. Now, the fun question for coaches that we ask not every time, but we ask a lot of times at the end. If you're thinking of an athlete in any sport, in any position that could play any other sport in and any other position at a high level, what athlete from what sport would that be? Not name, just the position and the sport.
Oh, wow. Because my experiences in soccer so much, it would, I'll have to wimp out and pick from there. And I'd say it's tough because midfield, you have to have an element of everything. You have to be able to link play so much. You have to go and attack. You have to go out. help defend. So you do have that exposure to all these multiple areas. But most coaches, great coaches, are defenders because they see the game so much. They see it from the back and what they do, and they're not always your best physical athletes out there, but they have to make up for it in other ways. So they have to make up for it through tactical nouns, through decision making and things like that, skills that you can apply in different other sports. So I'm wimping out there to say midfield
So you
into
saying?
any other
So you
kind of
saying? Uh,
skill-based locomotive
uh,
sport, but defenders,
uh,
defenders are
defender.
more
My daughter would.
knowledgeable.
My daughter would love you for saying defenders because she was a defender in her high school and college days. So midfielder or defender?
I'd say so, yeah. Strikers just get all the money, so they don't need to
Yeah, they don't need the accolades
go
too.
to other sports. But what your best players are your strikers. I'm giving the worst answer ever here, you. Because
Eh,
I'm not video
no,
game, but your
look,
best
look.
players are your strikers. They've got to do the most difficult thing, which is put the ball in the back of the net. That
This
is
is
the hardest thing in football.
this is one of those questions that doesn't have a right or a wrong answer. It's just a perception that we all have that we think that there's somebody uh, that could play any sport that we see. Like
Yeah,
I lean towards a, outside defensive back in American football because they spend half the time running backwards and getting twisted up, reacting to what the other guy's doing. But
yeah,
there's an argument that it's the other guy that it's the receiver, and then there's an argument that it's a basketball player that's a two or a shooting guard or a forward. So it's just interesting to ask.
yeah. Well, I'm
Listen,
mighty relieved that there isn't a right answer because I definitely didn't give it.
listen, Tom. We could talk, another hour, but unfortunately, I don't want to get in trouble. Uh, so I
Yeah, I'm
think
getting in trouble at this end. I've been kicked out of two rooms while we've been speaking, so
I
I don't
I
want to be
think
kicked out of a third.
I think I think that we would like to have you back in the future to catch up with what you're doing for sure, and then if we're ever in the same place sometime, make sure we touch bases. But I appreciate your time. I appreciate you going through the the scheduling thing with the time differences. Sometimes we get that, but we like to get people from across the world and not just one perspective. And this has been great, and I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, big appreciation back to yourself. Honoured to be passed on in the first place. I'd be super honoured to get the opportunity again because I feel this has been such an easy conversation. There's lots more to talk about, but yeah, and thanks for all your work on the podcast. It gives all us practitioners um, so much information, skill-based information, but also inspiration as well. When you hear these top names in the industries and you hear how passionate they are and how knowledgeable they are, it inspires you to be as good as you can be. So it's brilliant in so many respects.
Well, again, Tom, I thank you for coming on. Thank you for the kind words about the podcast. And ladies and gentlemen, this has been Performance Talk. And our guest today has been Thomas Little. Um, Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.